A trawler. North Sea. 1931. The crew of the Colinda hauls in their net somewhere east of Norfolk, about 25 miles off the English coast. What comes up isn't just fish. It's a block of peat. Dark, dense, dragged from the seabed. The kind of thing you curse at and throw back. This time, someone cuts it open. Inside, a barbed harpoon point. Carved from antler bone. Shaped with clear, deliberate intention. The kind of object that doesn't form by accident. That harpoon was later dated to roughly 8,000 to 10,000 years old. Mesolithic. Made by human hands. At the bottom of the sea. 25 miles from shore. The question isn't just how it got there. The question is, what world did it belong to? Because that world is down there. And we've barely started looking. Here's what we know, and this part is not disputed. During the last ice age, sea levels were dramatically lower than today. At the peak, roughly 20,000 years ago, the ocean sat around 120 meters below its current level. That means the North Sea, all of it, was dry land. Not tundra. Not ice sheet. Rich, habitable terrain. A landscape of river valleys, marshlands, forests, and gentle hills connecting Britain to the European continent in an unbroken stretch. Geologists and archaeologists have a name for it, Doggerland. Named after Dogger Bank, the shallow underwater ridge where commercial fishermen have, for more than a century, hauled up the bones of woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, and occasionally, disturbingly, human remains. This was not a narrow land bridge. Seismic surveys reconstructed from oil industry data show a territory roughly the size of modern Germany. Perhaps larger. A major river system, tentatively called the Shot-Ton River by some researchers, drained much of it, flowing north through what is now the open sea. This place had a geography. It had a climate milder than you'd expect for that latitude. And for thousands of years, it had people. And here's what those people existed before. Egypt's first dynasty is dated to around 3100 BCE. The Great Pyramid, roughly 2560 BCE. The people of Doggerland were living in this landscape 8,000 years ago. Some of their ancestors were there even earlier. That is more than 4,000 years before the pharaohs. Their entire world is gone. Submerged. Mostly unmapped. And almost entirely unstudied. But the story of how it ended, that's where things stop being just interesting and start being something harder to shake. In the late 1990s and into the 2000s, archaeologist Vince Gaffney at the University of Bradford led a project that should have made international headlines. His team took seismic survey data, the kind that oil companies collect when they're prospecting beneath the seafloor, and repurposed it entirely. Not to find oil. To find Doggerland. What they mapped was extraordinary. River systems preserved in sediment. Lagoons. Estuaries. A central elevated region Gaffney's team called the Dogger Hills, a highland area that would have stayed above water even as the surrounding flatlands flooded, potentially becoming the last refuge of a shrinking world. They described what they found as, in their words, potentially the last major habitable landscape in northwest Europe to be colonized by humans after the last ice age. Read that carefully. The last major landscape. Colonized after everywhere else. Which means it was also the last to disappear. And the people living through that disappearance, the ones who watched the coastline retreat season by season, generation by generation, we know almost nothing about them. But we know they were there. The harpoon from the Colinda sits right now in Norwich Castle Museum. It's one of the most significant prehistoric artifacts in British history. Ask the average person if they've heard of it. Ask them if they've heard of Doggerland. the answer tells you something about which stories get told. Around 6200 BCE, give or take a century, something happened off the coast of Norway. An underwater landslide. One of the largest in recorded geological history. The Storegga slide, approximately 3,000 cubic kilometers of seafloor collapsed into the deep ocean. In minutes. It sent a tsunami across the North Atlantic. Geological evidence, layers of sand and marine sediment found far inland across Scotland and Scandinavia, suggests the wave reached heights of 10 to 25 meters in certain coastal areas. Let that settle in. By 6200 BCE, Doggerland had already been shrinking for thousands of years. But there was still land above water. Marshland, estuary, the remnant of that once vast interior, and people living on it. Any community camped on those flat coastal wetlands the morning the Storegga wave arrived would have had almost no warning. Some researchers argue this wasn't just the slow, quiet drowning the textbooks describe. They argue it may have been, for the people actually living through it, sudden. Violent. A world ending not across millennia but within a single human lifetime. Possibly in a single morning. This is debated. Some geologists argue the wave's impact on what remained of Doggerland was less severe than on Scotland or Norway, that the shape of the seabed may have absorbed some of its force. But here's what no one disputes. By around 6000 BCE, Doggerland was gone. Fully submerged. Whatever population survived became refugees on the margins of what we now call Britain, Denmark, the Netherlands. Some researchers, carefully, tentatively, suggest this catastrophic loss of land may have entered the memory of Northern European peoples. May have been carried forward in oral tradition across generations. Maybe, in some distorted form, the seed of the flood myths that appear across this region thousands of years later. That is a theory. A speculative one. Be clear about that. But it's not a frivolous one either. Because the next part of this story, this is the part nobody was prepared for. In 2009, a commercial fishing vessel working the Zeeland Ridges, an underwater area off the Dutch coast, dredged up a fragment of skull. It wasn't Mesolithic. It wasn't from Doggerland's final inhabitants. It was Neanderthal. The fragment was later dated and identified in research published in the Journal of Human Evolution. A Neanderthal had walked this landscape tens of thousands of years before the Mesolithic people who used that harpoon. They walked the same valleys, crossed the same rivers, probably hunted the same megafauna whose bones keep turning up in fishermen's nets. And here's the thing that gets me. We found that skull fragment because someone happened to be dragging a net across that particular stretch of seabed. How many others are down there? Systematic underwater archaeology in the North Sea barely exists. The conditions make it brutally difficult: cold, dark, strong currents, deep silt, crushing operational costs. What we know about Doggerland comes almost entirely from accidental finds and repurposed oil industry data. There are almost certainly campsites down there. Not cities, don't misread this, but seasonal settlements, hearths, middens. Those ancient rubbish heaps that preserve organic material with remarkable fidelity. Possibly burials. And every commercial trawler dragging its net across that seabed is disturbing sediment that has sat undisturbed for 8,000 years. The archaeology isn't happening fast enough. And the window for some of what's down there may already be closing. Here's how the mainstream tells this, and they're not wrong. Doggerland is a well-understood geological event. Sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, they always do. The land flooded, gradually, over thousands of years. The people adapted. They moved. They merged with populations on higher ground. Life continued elsewhere. End of story, geologically speaking. There's no conspiracy in Doggerland's obscurity. No one suppressed it. The reason most people have never heard of it is simpler and sadder. Prehistoric hunter-gatherers with no written language don't generate the same cultural gravity as pyramids. They didn't build in stone. They didn't leave monuments. They left a harpoon in a block of peat. And it took a fisherman cutting it open by chance for us to even know they existed. That's the mainstream view. Fair, measured, and largely correct. But here's where the settled story gets unsettled. If the Storegga tsunami was as significant as the sediment evidence suggests, and that evidence is real and peer-reviewed, then the end of Doggerland may not have been the gradual fade we picture. Some researchers argue there were episodes of rapid, catastrophic inundation within those final centuries. And if communities were displaced that quickly, if a landscape that families had occupied for generations was suddenly, violently gone, then what happened to everything they carried in their heads? Navigation, seasonal knowledge, the memory of landscapes that no longer existed. All of it submerged with the land. We assume hunter-gatherers left no trace beyond the physical. But knowledge doesn't need to be written to be real. And its disappearance doesn't need to leave evidence to be a loss. The question that haunts this story isn't whether Doggerland was a civilization in any grand sense. It wasn't, not by any standard definition of the word. The question is what we lost that we don't even know we lost. The North Sea covers 575,000 square kilometers. Beneath it, 8,000 years of silence. A harpoon point in a museum in Norwich. Mammoth bones on trawler decks. A Neanderthal skull fragment identified in a laboratory years after it came up in someone's catch. These are the breadcrumbs from a world we barely knew existed. And here's the thing, Doggerland is not unique. Sea levels rose everywhere after the last ice age. Coastal landscapes drowned on every continent. The continental shelves of Southeast Asia. The Persian Gulf. The coastlines of India. All of them were occupied. All of them went under. If an entire inhabited territory the size of Germany can disappear so completely that we only rediscovered it in the last century, not through excavation, but through oil industry data and the contents of fishing nets. What else is down there? What other chapters of human prehistory are sitting on a seafloor somewhere, waiting for a sonar survey or a researcher who asks the question they weren't supposed to ask? Tell me in the comments. Does Doggerland change how you think about who we were before the history books begin? And if the idea of a world swallowed by water shakes something loose, there's another buried chapter on screen right now. One that's even harder to explain away. The past is deeper than we were taught. It always is.